Alice Day burst onto the scene in the mid-1920s as a successful silent comedienne, eventually finding stardom that she carried into the talkies. But by 1932, she had retired. Why? Join me as I investigate. Alice Day was born as Jacqueline Alice Irene Newland in 1905 in Colorado Springs to Frank and Irene Newland. She had a younger sister, Marceline, who would also go on to be a star. Be sure to join me as I cover Marceline's career next week. According to Silence is Platinum, Frank and Irene divorced shortly after Marceline was born in 1908, and in 1910, Irene took her two daughters and moved back in with her parents. A 1930 article indicates that Alice went to high school in the Venice area of Los Angeles, so by some point, the family had moved out west. In 1923, at the age of 18, Alice was discovered, I'm assuming by Max Sennett or someone from his company, as she soon became one of his famous bathing beauties. She also changed her last name to Day. Also that year, she appeared in a major supporting role in her film debut, The Temple of Venus at Fox, which was a modern tale of Venus and Cupid that starred Mary Philbin. While an article in Motion Picture News indicates that there were bathing beauties in the film, including Alice, I cannot find confirmation that they were Sennett bathing beauties, but they very well could have been. Also in 1923, she starred in a comedy short, My Pal, which co-starred Pal, the dog, and Ernie Adams. From 1924 to 1927, Alice would go on to star in 35-plus Max Sennett-produced comedy shorts, starting out in bit parts and eventually working her way up to being a leading lady to Harry Langdon and finally headlining her own Alice Day comedies. She also had an occasional feature film here and there, such as the Norma Talmadge vehicle Secrets in 1924. Highlights of her Sennett films include, in 1924, His New Mama, in which she was leading lady to Langdon, Romeo and Juliet, in which she starred as Juliet in a modern comedic retelling of the famous story, and The First 100 Years, in which she was wife to Langdon again, and this time she is not amused when he brings home a beautiful vampy maid played by Madeline Herlock. Incidentally, Alice and Madeline were comedic foils in many of these shorts, Alice always playing the innocent ingenue and Madeline playing the vamp. In all three of these films, Alice shines and her considerable talent is evident, particularly in The First 100 Years, in which her facial reactions to her husband and his new maid's nonsense are hysterical. By 1925, Alice had worked her way up to appearing in what were advertised as Alice Day comedies, produced by Sennett, and one advertisement for them stated, Alice Day, the sweet-faced charmer who has appeared in so many Sennett comedies during the past year, is now a comedy star in her own right. When Sennett picks a star, he picks one who has earned the name Alice Day has. One of her highlights in 1925 with Sennett was A Sweet Pickle, in which Motion Picture News gave her an excellent review for her comedic work, stating, Miss Day comes through with an excellent performance. Another hit for her that year was The Soap Suds Lady, which also got her great notice in Motion Picture News. Alice continued on in her Alice Day comedies throughout 1926 and 1927, including Spanking Breezes, a fun short in which she and Danny O'Shea starred as newlyweds who are desperately trying to escape their family members and enjoy a honeymoon, and The Plumber's Daughter, in which she starred as the title role, a young girl forced to help her father in his work after he catches her on a date with a young man. In 1926, Alice starred in her first feature-length film, which was at Preferred Pictures, His New York Wife. However, towards the end of 1927, Alice seems to have left Sennett to focus on starring in feature films full-time at First National, beginning with See You in Jail, a comedy with Jack Mahal in which Variety stated that she stands out in a cute role which she handles trimly and without overemphasis. Her biggest feature film hit of 1927 was the horror comedy The Gorilla, which was based on the hit Broadway play of the same name and concerned an ape that is apparently committing a series of murders at a mansion. Alice played the classic heroine in distress, Alice Townsend. In 1928, Alice had her biggest year yet as a star. First, she was loaned to MGM to star opposite William Haynes in the wacky comedy The Smart Set, in which she played a society girl pursued by a zany polar player, played by Haynes, leading to many comedic situations. While Haynes' hilarious antics are definitely the big draw for the film, Alice more than held her own against him, showing the amazing comedic training she had received by working with Sennett. In June of that year, Alice was loaned to Universal to play the title character in Phyllis of the Follies, which also starred Edmund Burns, before making her talkie debut at the end of that year in Red Hot Speed, a part talkie that also starred Reginald Denny. While Variety gave the early talkie mixed reviews, they singled out Alice's work and predicted her as being a contender for a distinction in the talkers. Even though she had been starring in films since 1924, 1928 was such a successful year for her that she was finally named a Wampus Baby Star. 1929 saw Alice continue her streak of talkie successes. First, she starred with Richard Barthelmess and Lila Lee in Drag. Next, she starred with Monty Blue, Davy Lee, and Betty Compson in Skin Deep. Perhaps her biggest hit that year was George M. Cohan's Little Johnny Jones, a screen musical adaptation of his famous Broadway hit musical, in which Variety stated that Alice Day is charming as usual. She also was featured with her sister Marceline and tons of other stars in Show of Shows, Warner Brothers' Talkie Musical Extravaganza Showcase. Alice and Marceline were soloists in the Meet My Sister number that also featured Viola Dana and Shirley Mason, Sally Blaine and Loretta Young, and Helene and Dolores Costello, among many other star sisters. However, as successful a year as 1929 was for Alice, she closed out the year in a supporting performance in The Love Racket, which was a vehicle for Dorothy McHale. She also entered 1930 at Warner Brothers, who by 29 had absorbed First National, with only 2 appearances at her home studio before apparently leaving or being dropped from contract there. Only one of these appearances was a starring role in The Next Room, a mystery that also starred Jack Mulhall. The other appearance was in a supporting role in Viennese Nights, which was a vehicle for stage star Vivian Siegel. Not discouraged, Alice moved on to various Poverty Row studios for the next few years to star in 7 more movies. At Chesterfield, she starred in the wonderful Ladies in Love as a radio singer that an inspiring songwriter played by Johnny Walker desperately wants to sing his new song and make it a hit. In an amazing, very against-type performance, Alice played a much more worldly and sophisticated character than usual and got to display her beautiful, sultry singing voice. At Tiffany that year, she also starred in Hot Curves as a baseball team owner's daughter that falls for a pitcher played by Rex Leese. In 1931, Alice gave another interesting against-type performance in The Lady from Nowhere, playing Marion, a mysterious woman of the title that shows up to help a detective played by John Holland. However, following this exquisite work, Alice made just 3 more pictures. She had a brief appearance in Lovebound in 1932 as Jack Mulhall's fiancée and shared the screen with a who's who of former silent stars, including Mulhall, Clara Kimball Young, Montague Love, and Edmund Breeze. Alice then finished out her career starring in 2 B westerns, doing great work in both of them as a tough girl out west that becomes the love interest to the cowboy hero. The first was Two-Fisted Law opposite Tim McCoy, and the second was Gold opposite Jack Hoxsey. Following the release of Gold in 1932, Alice retired from acting for good. In 1930, Alice had married jeweler Jack Cohn and later gave birth to 2 sons, including Richard, which probably led to her leaving movies in 1932. There's not a ton of information out there about what Alice did after retiring, aside from probably enjoying life with her family. We do know that Alice and Cohn divorced in 1939. I'm assuming that she spent the rest of her life quietly enjoying time with her sons. Alice lived to be 88 years old and passed away in 1995. So we are left with the question, why did Alice's stardom falter in the talkies after such an impressive start in 1929? My conclusion is that when First National merged with Warner Brothers that year, there were just so many stars on her Warner Brothers roster that Alice unfortunately fell through the cracks. In 1930, either her contract expired and she was let go, or she decided to try her luck at other studios to get better roles. Even though she worked only in B movies for the next few years, Alice truly got to demonstrate her range as an actress and play roles outside of her usual niche as a humorous ingenue. It's interesting that so many silent stars who are given a chance to play against type only after they leave their home big studio and enter Poverty Row. Alice was no exception. But after giving birth to her son in 1931, she decided to throw in the towel to focus on family life. It's hard to predict whether or not Alice would have found more starring opportunities or would have begun a new career as a character actress. She was a truly talented lady, and it's a shame that the studios didn't seem to realize how versatile she truly was. At least we have many of her performances to enjoy that show her enormous talent. I suggest checking out her 1924 silent comedies with Harry Langdon on YouTube, and in particular look at the first 100 years. You can also find her wonderful work with William Haynes in The Smart Set on YouTube, and you can see a different side of Alice on YouTube in Ladies in Love and The Lady from Nowhere. Here's to you, Alice Day. Please like and subscribe or follow this account if you want to learn more about the history of silent film stars whose stardom lasted only briefly in the talkies. Up next, join me as I cover the career of Alice's sister, Marceline Day. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great rest of your weekend.